Learn to transmute all unpleasant circumstances into a positive mental attitude. By switching your thoughts to something that you find pleasant, focus on the pleasant thoughts for 5 minutes in order to change your mental attitude from negative to positive. The world does not reward average effort with extraordinary results. This is the first truth you must accept on your journey to prosperity. Look around you at the monuments of achievement, at the empires built, at the fortunes amassed. None of these were accidents of fate. None arrived through wishful thinking alone. They materialized because certain individuals grasped a fundamental principle that remains hidden from most people: the power of the decisive 5 minutes that separate dreamers from achievers. Throughout history, there exists an invisible line between those who merely desire success and those who command it. It's not talent alone that determines which side of this line you stand on. It's not education, connections, or even luck. It's your capacity to invoke action in those critical moments when others hesitate. This is the essence of the 5-minute principle, a concept first observed by Andrew Carnegie and documented in my years of research, studying over 500 of the world's most successful individuals. The principle is deceptively simple yet profoundly powerful. When faced with an important decision or action that moves you toward your definite purpose, give yourself exactly 5 minutes to begin. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, not when you feel completely ready. 5 minutes from now. Consider Thomas Edison, who faced repeated failure in his quest to create the electric light bulb. After thousands of unsuccessful attempts, he didn't allow himself the luxury of procrastination or self-doubt. Instead, he committed to immediate action, saying, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Each time a design failed, Edison gave himself just minutes to begin the next iteration. This relentless application of the 5-minute principle eventually illuminated the world. You might be thinking, "But I'm not Thomas Edison." Perhaps not, but neither was he born Thomas Edison. He became Edison through the consistent application of principles that are available to anyone with the courage to apply them. The same force that transformed him is accessible to you at this very moment. The wealthy and successful individuals I've studied over decades share a common characteristic. They do not dwell in indecision. When Henry Ford decided to double his workers' wages in 1914, a move that shocked the business world, he didn't spend months overthinking the decision. He gave himself minutes to act. Once the idea crystallized, that single decision, made quickly and definitively, revolutionized the manufacturing industry and built one of history's greatest fortunes. Right now, you possess untapped reservoirs of potential waiting to be channeled into purposeful action. Your mind is the most powerful force on earth when properly directed. But like electricity, this power must be conducted through action to produce results. Without action, your thoughts remain as useless as an unplugged lamp. The reason most people never achieve the success they desire is not that they lack goals or dreams. It's that they've never trained themselves to overcome the moment of resistance that precedes meaningful action. That resistance, that invisible wall between thinking and doing, is what the 5-minute principle helps you break through. Imagine your life as a great ship on the ocean. Your thoughts are the rudder, capable of steering your direction. But without the engine of immediate action, your ship remains anchored in the harbor of mediocrity, regardless of how ambitious your planned destination might be. The 5-minute principle is the ignition switch for your engine. Let me be clear, this is not merely about being quick to act. Haste without direction leads nowhere meaningful. The principle works only when paired with a definite purpose, your clearly defined goal that burns in your mind with unwavering intensity. With this definite purpose as your compass, the 5-minute principle becomes transformative. Consider the story of a young woman I once advised. Sarah had dreamed of starting her own business for years, but remained trapped in the comfortable prison of her corporate job. Month after month, she researched and planned her venture without taking concrete steps to begin. When I introduced her to the 5-minute principle, everything changed. I challenged her to take one decisive action toward her business. Within 5 minutes of our conversation, she called a potential client she had been nervous about approaching. That single call, made in a moment of commitment rather than convenience, secured her first contract. Within 6 months, her business was generating more income than her former job. Within 2 years, she had built a six-figure enterprise. The change in her fortune wasn't due to a dramatic shift in her knowledge or abilities. It was the implementation of immediate action that altered everything. What could you accomplish if you applied this same principle to your deepest aspiration? What might change if, instead of promising yourself someday, you committed to 5 minutes from now? The most successful people understand that certainty is an illusion. There is never a perfect moment to begin. Every significant achievement in human history started with an imperfect action taken despite uncertainty. Walt Disney was rejected by 300 bankers before securing funding for Disneyland. Had he waited for certainty or perfect conditions, millions of children would never have experienced the magic he created. The 5-minute principle cuts through the fog of hesitation that clouds most people's path to achievement. It recognizes that the mind seeks comfort and will create endless justifications for inaction. I'll start when I have more information. I'll begin when I feel more confident. I'll act when the timing is better. These are the whispers of mediocrity, lulling you into perpetual preparation without production. The principle demands that you silence these whispers with immediate commitment. It asks not that you complete your journey in 5 minutes, but that you begin it within that time frame. This subtle yet profound shift in approach creates momentum, and momentum, once established, is difficult to stop. I have observed this principle at work across cultures, industries, and eras. The banker who becomes a financial titan, the writer who becomes a best-selling author, the entrepreneur who builds an empire, all share this common practice. They collapse the gap between decision and action to nearly nothing. While others deliberate, they initiate. Consider your own life. How many opportunities have slipped through your fingers not because you lacked the ability to seize them, but because you delayed taking action until the moment had passed? How many ideas have you had that others later implemented successfully? The difference between you and them was not the quality of the idea, but the speed of implementation. The application of the 5-minute principle requires mental discipline. It demands that you recognize the voice of resistance when it speaks and refuse to obey it. This voice manifests in many forms, as fear disguised as prudence, as perfectionism masquerading as quality control, as preparation pretending to be necessary when it's merely procrastination. When John D. Rockefeller saw the opportunity in the emerging oil industry, he didn't wait for others to validate his vision or for perfect market conditions. He gave himself minutes to commit to his course of action. That decisive moment when action immediately followed insight laid the foundation for one of history's greatest fortunes. You might be wondering, does this principle apply only to business decisions? Absolutely not. The 5-minute principle is universal in its application. The artist who commits brush to canvas rather than merely envisioning the painting, the student who begins studying immediately rather than planning to study later, the person seeking better health who puts on running shoes and steps outside, rather than researching optimal exercise schedules. In each case, the principle operates with equal power. It is the universal law of transformed potential, the conversion of thought energy into physical reality through the conduit of immediate action. Now, I want you to think about something that you've been postponing. Perhaps it's a business idea you've been contemplating. Maybe it's a conversation you know you need to have. It could be a book you've wanted to write or a skill you've wanted to learn. Whatever it is, I want you to feel the weight of postponement, the heaviness of unrealized potential. This feeling, this burden of what could be, but isn't yet, is the price of violating the 5-minute principle. It is the tax levied on those who separate decision from action by more than the critical 5-minute window, and it is a tax that compounds with time, growing heavier with each passing day. Let me be brutally honest with you. The world doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't reward your plans or preparations, however elaborate they might be. The universe responds only to action, to energy in motion. Your thoughts, desires, and intentions are invisible to everyone but you until they manifest through decisive action. Think of Abraham Lincoln, who, despite limited formal education and repeated political failures, gave himself no room to doubt his capacity for leadership when the moment called. His application of the 5-minute principle, his willingness to act decisively when opportunity or necessity presented itself carried him to the presidency and immortality. It wasn't his circumstances that determined his destiny, it was his response to those circumstances. What separates you from the life you envision? Is it really external circumstances, or is it the gap between your decisions and your actions? The 5-minute principle suggests it is almost always the latter. I've worked with individuals who had every advantage: education, connections, financial resources, yet achieved little because they could not bridge this gap. I've also worked with those who had none of these advantages, but achieved remarkable success because they mastered the art of immediate action. Consider Eleanor, a woman born into poverty with no formal education beyond high school. When she learned about the opportunity in real estate investment, she didn't spend months researching or waiting until she had substantial capital. Within 5 minutes of learning about a potential property, she was on the phone with the seller, negotiating terms that required minimal upfront investment. 20 years later, her real estate holdings were valued in the millions. She didn't have advantages, she had action. The 5-minute principle operates on multiple levels. On the surface, it creates momentum and produces immediate results. But its deeper power lies in how it reprograms your subconscious mind. Each time you collapse the gap between decision and action, you strengthen neural pathways that make future action easier. This is why successful people appear to have more willpower or determination than others. It's not that they were born with these qualities in abundance. Rather, they've systematically trained their minds through the consistent application of principles like the 5-minute rule. They've conditioned themselves to act when others hesitate. The human mind resists change. It clings to familiar patterns even when those patterns no longer serve us. The 5-minute principle acknowledges this resistance and overcomes it not through heroic effort, but through immediate commitment. It doesn't ask you to transform your entire life at once. It asks only that you begin now, not later. The principle works because it bypasses the rational mind's tendency to overanalyze and activates the part of you that accomplishes rather than contemplates. It leverages a psychological truth. Action precedes motivation, not the other way around. By committing to immediate action, you generate the very motivation you've been waiting to feel before starting. I've seen this truth demonstrated repeatedly with individuals who believed they lacked motivation or drive. When they applied the 5-minute principle, they discovered that these qualities weren't missing, they were simply dormant, waiting to be awakened through decisive action. Think about the times in your life when you've felt most alive, most powerful, most capable. Were these times characterized by contemplation or action? For most, the answer is clear. We feel most alive when we are in motion toward meaningful goals, when we are doing rather than merely planning to do. The 5-minute principle restores this sense of aliveness by eliminating the delay between intention and implementation. It reconnects you with the power that is your birthright, the power to transform your environment, rather than being transformed by it. Now, let me address a common misconception. Some believe that the 5-minute principle advocates impulsive behavior or thoughtless action. Nothing could be further from the truth. The principle is not about eliminating thought, but about ensuring that thought culminates in action, rather than endless rumination. The most successful individuals I've studied are deep thinkers. They consider options carefully. They weigh potential outcomes. And this is crucial, they don't allow this thinking process to become an end in itself. They recognize that at some point, additional contemplation yields diminishing returns. When that point arrives, they invoke the 5-minute principle and move from thought to action without delay. This balanced approach, thoughtful consideration followed by decisive action, is the hallmark of achievement in any field. It combines the wisdom of reflection with the power of implementation. Consider Steve Jobs, who combined visionary thinking with relentless execution. When presented with the concept that would become the iPhone, he didn't just contemplate its potential or order more market research. He committed Apple's resources to development within minutes of recognizing the opportunity. That decision, made quickly after thoughtful consideration, changed the trajectory of global technology and communication. The power of the 5-minute principle expands as your definite purpose becomes clearer. When you know exactly what you want to achieve, when your goal burns in your mind with crystal clarity, decisions become simpler. and action becomes more immediate. The principle and purpose work in harmony, each strengthening the other. This is why defining your purpose with precision is essential. Vague aspiration lead to hesitant actions. Specific goals inspire immediate commitment. I want to be successful is too nebulous to trigger the 5-minute principle effectively. I want to build $1 million business selling organic skin care products to environmentally conscious consumers provides the clarity that makes immediate action both possible and powerful. I challenge you to define your purpose with this level of specificity. Then, apply the 5-minute principle to that. Purpose today, not tomorrow, not when circumstances improve, but in the next 5 minutes. What one action, taken immediately, would move you toward your definite purpose? What phone call could you make? What email could you send? What document could you create? What conversation could you initiate? Identify that action and commit to it now, before the resistance that prevents achievement has time to mobilize its forces against you. The application of this principle requires courage. It demands that you act before you feel completely ready, because the truth is, you will never feel completely ready for any significant endeavor. The most successful individuals are not those who have conquered fear or eliminated uncertainty. They are those who act decisively despite these feelings. Consider Madam C.J. Walker, who became America's first female self-made millionaire against overwhelming odds. Born to former slaves and widowed at 20, she didn't wait for perfect conditions to build her hair care empire. When she recognized the need for quality hair products for Black women, she gave herself no time to doubt her capacity to fill that need. Her application of the 5-minute principle, her immediate movement from recognition to action created a fortune and a legacy that endures to this day. Or consider Coco Chanel, who revolutionized women's fashion by acting on her insights immediately, rather than waiting for validation from the established fashion houses of her era. When she saw the opportunity to liberate women from the constraints of corseted clothing, she didn't spend months seeking approval or refining her concept to perfection. She acted within minutes of her realization, creating prototypes that would eventually transform an industry and build an iconic brand. These examples span different eras, industries, and circumstances, yet they share the common thread of the 5-minute principle. In each case, success wasn't determined by favorable conditions, but by immediate action in response to recognized opportunity. Now, you might be thinking, these are exceptional individuals. Their stories don't apply to my ordinary life. But this thinking reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of how achievement works. These individuals weren't exceptional before they applied principles like the 5-minute rule. They became exceptional through the application of these principles. The truth is, both liberating and demanding, the same forces that shaped their success are available to you at this moment. The same principles that built their fortunes can build yours. The same laws that govern their achievement govern yours. The only question is whether you will apply these laws with the same diligence and consistency. The 5-minute principle doesn't guarantee immediate results. What it guarantees is immediate movement in the direction of your goals, and sustained movement, maintained over time, inevitably produces results that appear miraculous to those who don't understand the principle at work. I've studied individuals who applied this principle consistently for years, often with little visible progress at first. Then, seemingly overnight, their circumstances transformed dramatically. The outside world saw only the sudden success, not understanding that it was built through thousands of 5-minute commitments that eventually reached critical mass. This pattern, consistent application followed by breakthrough results, appears repeatedly in the lives of high achievers. It reflects not just the 5-minute principle, but another universal law, the law of compounding. Action, just as money compounds when interest is reinvested, actions compound when their momentum is maintained through immediate commitment. Consider your own experience. Have you ever noticed how the hardest part of any significant task is often just beginning? The first word of the book is the hardest to write. The first call to a potential client is the hardest to make. The first step of the fitness routine is the hardest to take. The 5-minute principle acknowledges this psychological reality and provides a practical method for overcoming it. By committing to begin within 5 minutes, You bypass the resistance that prevents most people from ever starting their journey to achievement. Once begun, the task often reveals itself to be less daunting than imagination had painted it. Momentum builds, confidence grows, results accumulate. This is the hidden advantage of those who apply the principle consistently. They don't just accomplish more in the present. They systematically reduce the psychological barriers to action that hold back most people. Over time, this creates an ever-widening gap between their results and those of individuals who delay action. I want you to imagine two individuals with identical talents, education, and opportunities. Both desire the same achievement. Both develop similar plans, but one applies the 5-minute principle while the other delays action. After 1 year, the difference in their results might be noticeable but not dramatic. After 5 years, the gap has widened significantly. After a decade, they inhabit different worlds. This divergence of destinies isn't due to any inherent superiority, but to the consistent application of a principle that converts potential into reality. Through immediate action, it is the most predictable path to what others call luck or overnight success. Now, let me address another misconception. The 5-minute principle doesn't demand that you complete your goal in 5 minutes. It demands only that you begin that. You take the first actionable step within that time frame. This distinction is crucial. Many people overwhelm themselves by focusing on the entirety of the journey ahead. They see the 1,000 steps required and become paralyzed, never taking the first step. The principle cuts through this paralysis by focusing attention solely on beginning, not on completing. Think about any significant achievement in your life. Did you accomplish it all at once or through a series of steps taken one after another? The answer is obvious, yet when facing new challenges, we often forget this truth. We stare at the mountain peak instead of the path directly before us. The 5-minute principle redirects your attention to the immediate step, the only one you can actually take. This focus on immediate action rather than distant completion connects to another principle I've observed in successful individuals. They maintain unwavering faith in ultimate achievement while focusing on present action. They combine long-term vision with short-term focus. Consider how Martin Luther King Jr. pursued his vision of equality. He didn't allow the magnitude of the challenge to prevent immediate action. When opportunity presented itself, he gave himself no time to doubt or hesitate. His application of the 5-minute principle, his immediate movement from inspiration to action, helped transform a nation. The same principle applies to your life, regardless of your field or aspiration. Whether you seek financial independence, artistic expression, physical excellence, or spiritual growth, the path begins with immediate action. Not tomorrow, not when circumstances align perfectly, but within 5 minutes of making your decision. Let me share a personal experience that illustrates the power of this principle. Years ago, I interviewed one of America's most successful insurance executives for my research. When I asked about the turning point in his career, he shared his story about applying what I now call the 5-minute principle. As a struggling agent, he had identified a potential high-value client, but hesitated to make contact. Feeling unprepared and intimidated by the prospect's status, one morning, he decided to change his approach. He gave himself exactly 5 minutes to pick up the phone once he had the prospect's information. No preparation, no rehearsal, just immediate action. That call resulted in his largest commission to date. More importantly, it established a pattern of immediate action that transformed his career. Within 5 years, he had risen from struggling agent to regional director. Within 10, he was a national vice president. His income increased by over 5,000% during this period. What changed? Not his knowledge, credentials, or the external market. What changed was his relationship to action, his collapse of the gap between decision and implementation. By applying the 5-minute principle consistently, he reprogrammed his mind to overcome the resistance that had previously limited his achievements. You have the same capacity. The neural pathways that connect decision to action in your brain can be strengthened through consistent application of this principle. Each time you commit to immediate action, you make the next commitment easier. Each time you collapse the gap between thinking and doing, you increase your capacity for achievement. This cumulative effect explains why some individuals seem to accomplish more in a month than others do in a year. It's not that they have more hours available or greater capabilities. It's that they've systematically eliminated the delay between idea and implementation that constrains most people's results. Now, I want to address a question that often arises. Does the 5-minute principle apply to complex decisions that seem to require extensive deliberation? Absolutely, though, with an important qualification. For decisions that truly require deep analysis, the principle applies not to the final decision, but to the process of gathering the information needed to make that decision. Instead of promising yourself you'll start researching tomorrow, you commit to beginning within 5 minutes. Instead of planning to consult experts eventually, you pick up the phone immediately. By applying the principle to the components of complex decisions, you accelerate the entire process without sacrificing thoroughness. You move from abstract contemplation to concrete information gathering without delay. Consider how J.P. Morgan built his financial empire. When facing complex investment decisions, he didn't allow the complexity to justify procrastination. He immediately initiated the process of acquiring the specific information needed, often surprising his competitors with the speed of his due diligence and subsequent action. This approach, immediate action within a thoughtful framework, combines the best of careful analysis and decisive implementation. It recognizes that even the most complex achievements begin with a single, often simple, initial step taken without delay. The 5-minute principle also reveals something profound about human potential. Most people operate at a fraction of their capability, not because of external limitations, but because of internal delays between conception and action. By eliminating these delays, you tap into reservoirs of productivity and creativity that remain dormant in most individuals. I've observed this phenomenon repeatedly in my research. When people commit to immediate action, they often discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed. Skills emerge, confidence builds, resources materialize, opportunities present themselves. What appeared impossible becomes not just possible but inevitable. This transformation isn't mystical, it's mathematical. When you consistently convert ideas into actions within minutes rather than days or weeks, you exponentially increase your output and impact. The results aren't just quantitatively different, they're qualitatively transformed. Consider Milton Hershey, who failed in multiple candy businesses before creating the company that bears his name today. What distinguished his final successful venture from his earlier failures? The consistent application of immediate action. When he recognized the potential of mass-produced milk chocolate, he gave himself no time to doubt or hesitate. His application of the 5-minute principle, his immediate movement from inspiration to implementation, built a fortune and a legacy that endures. Or consider Oprah Winfrey, who transcended a childhood of poverty and abuse to become one of the world's most influential individuals. When she recognized the power of authentic connection with her audience, she didn't spend months developing a strategy. She acted immediately on her insight, transforming her approach to television and eventually building a media empire. The gap between her realization and her action was minimal, measured in minutes, not months. These examples span different eras, industries, and circumstances, yet they share the common thread of the 5-minute principle. In each case, success wasn't determined by inherited advantage, but by immediate action in response to recognized opportunity or insight. Now, you might be thinking, but what about planning? What about preparation? Aren't these essential to achievement? Of course they are. But here's the crucial distinction. Effective planning and preparation are themselves actions, not alternatives to action. The 5-minute principle doesn't eliminate planning. It ensures that planning itself begins immediately rather than being perpetually postponed. It converts planning from an abstract intention, "I should really develop a strategy for this," to a concrete action, "I am outlining my approach right now." This subtle shift makes all the difference. When planning becomes an immediate action rather than a future intention, it produces practical strategies rather than perpetual preparation. It creates momentum rather than delay. Consider how General Electric's Jack Welch approached business challenges. When faced with the need to restructure the company, He didn't allow the magnitude of the task to justify prolonged analysis. He immediately initiated the planning process, gathering key information and perspectives within hours of recognizing the necessity. This application of the 5-minute principle beginning the process, without delay, enabled transformative change that might never have occurred had initial action been postponed. The same principle applies to your life and aspiration. Whatever challenge or opportunity you face, the question is not whether you will eventually address it, but whether you will begin addressing it within the next 5 minutes. This single decision to act immediately, rather than eventually, often determines whether your potential becomes reality or remains merely possibility. I've studied individuals who applied this principle to personal transformation with remarkable results. Consider James, who struggled with obesity for decades. He had accumulated shelves of diet books and exercise guides, but remained trapped in a cycle of postponed action. When he learned about the 5-minute principle, everything changed. Instead of planning to begin a comprehensive fitness regimen next Monday, he committed to taking a 5-minute walk within 5 minutes of making the decision. That single walk led to another the next day, and another the day after. Within a year, he had lost over 100 pounds and transformed his health. The change wasn't the result of discovering new information. He already had abundant knowledge. It was the implementation of immediate action that altered everything. Or consider Marie, who dreamed of writing a novel for 20 years but never began. When she learned about the 5-minute principle, she committed to writing a single paragraph within 5 minutes. That paragraph led to a page, the page to a chapter, the chapter to a completed manuscript. 2 years later, her book was published, to critical acclaim. The difference wasn't in her writing ability, which had been there all along, but in her relationship to action. These transformations illustrate a profound truth. Most limitations are self-imposed through delayed action. The resources, abilities, and opportunities required for achievement are often already present in your life. What's missing is the immediate implementation that converts these potential assets into actual results. The 5-minute principle provides the bridge between potential and actualization. It transforms the abstract, "I could do that," into the concrete, "I am doing that right now." This transformation is the essence of achievement in any field or endeavor. Let me be clear about something. The principle isn't magic. It doesn't eliminate the need for sustained effort or overcome genuine external obstacles. What it does is ensure that you engage with these challenges directly and immediately, rather than postponing the engagement. This immediate engagement often reveals that perceived obstacles are less formidable than imagination had suggested. It distinguishes between genuine limitations and convenient excuses. It separates those who achieve from those who merely aspire. Consider Colonel Sanders, who was rejected over 1,000 times before finding a restaurant willing to use his chicken recipe. Had he allowed each rejection to delay his next attempt, had he violated the 5-minute principle by giving himself permission to try again tomorrow, Kentucky Fried Chicken would never have existed. His fortune and legacy were built not on immediate success, but on immediate action. Despite repeated failure, this persistence in immediate action distinguishes achievers across fields and eras. It's not that they never face rejection, setback, or failure. It's that they immediately initiate the next attempt rather than withdrawing into contemplation or self-doubt. The 5-minute principle doesn't just accelerate success. It transforms how you experience the journey itself. When you collapse the gap between decision and action, you eliminate the psychological burden of uncompleted commitments and unfulfilled intentions. You create congruence between your thoughts and behaviors, between who you aspire to be and how you actually live. This congruence generates a sense of personal power and integrity that transcends specific achievements. It creates what psychologists call internal locus of control, the belief that you determine your circumstances rather than being determined by them. This belief, when reinforced through immediate action, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of achievement. I've observed this psychological transformation repeatedly. When individuals apply the 5-minute principle consistently, they don't just accomplish more. They experience themselves differently. They move from feeling like victims of circumstance to creators of circumstance. This shift in self-perception often precedes and facilitates dramatic external changes. Consider Andrew Carnegie, who rose from impoverished immigrant to become the wealthiest man in America. His success wasn't predetermined by circumstances which could hardly have been less favorable. It was created through immediate action in response to recognized opportunity. The gap between his recognition and his response was minimal. Measured in minutes rather than days, the same principle applies to your life and aspiration. Your circumstances, whatever they may be, don't determine your ultimate achievements. Your response to those circumstances does. And the most powerful response is immediate action toward your definite purpose. I challenge you to examine your life through this lens. Where have you been postponing action? What opportunities have you recognized but not yet pursued? What decisions have you made internally but not yet implemented externally? These gaps between thought and action are the primary constraints on your achievement. The 5-minute principle provides the method for eliminating these constraints. It doesn't ask you to transform your entire life simultaneously. It asks only that you begin, that you take the first actionable step within 5 minutes of making your decision. This single shift in approach, applied consistently, can alter the trajectory of your life more profoundly than any amount of additional knowledge, resources, or connections. Think about it this way: knowledge without action is merely potential. Resources without implementation are merely possibilities. Connections without engagement are merely names. The 5-minute principle ensures that your knowledge becomes applied, your resources become utilized, and your connections become activated, all through the simple but powerful commitment to immediate action. This commitment doesn't require extraordinary willpower or discipline. It requires only the recognition that postponed action is often foregone action, that later frequently becomes never. With this recognition comes the determination to begin now, within 5 minutes, regardless of how small the initial step might be. The size of this initial step doesn't matter nearly as much as its immediacy. A small action taken now creates momentum that makes subsequent actions easier. A grand plan postponed creates nothing but the illusion of progress. Consider how Richard Branson built his Virgin Empire. He didn't wait until he had comprehensive business plans or secured substantial financing. When he recognized an opportunity, he took immediate action, often making the first phone call or scheduling the first meeting within minutes of his decision. This application of the 5-minute principle, sustained over decades, built one of the world's most recognized brands and a personal fortune measured in billions. Or consider J.K. Rowling, who began writing Harry Potter not when circumstances were ideal. She was a struggling single mother, facing financial hardship, but immediately upon conceiving the idea, during a delayed train journey, she didn't wait for better conditions or more time. She began writing within minutes, on whatever paper was available. That immediate action, that refusal to postpone creativity until conditions improved, eventually produced one of the most successful literary works in history. These examples illustrate a principle that transcends field, circumstance, or era. Achievement begins with immediate action, not perfect conditions. The 5-minute principle acknowledges this truth and provides the practical method for applying it in your life, regardless of your current situation or ultimate aspiration. I want you to consider something. The time will pass regardless of whether you act. 5 years from now, you will be 5 years older, whether you pursue your goals or postpone them. The only question is what you will have to show for the passing time. Will you have results and experiences, or merely plans and intentions? The 5-minute principle ensures that you accumulate achievements rather than merely accumulating time. It converts the passing hours and days into tangible progress toward your definite purpose. It transforms time from an adversary that diminishes opportunity into an ally that builds legacy. This transformation begins not with extraordinary effort, but with immediate commitment, with the simple but powerful decision to begin within 5 minutes rather than someday. This decision, made repeatedly across days and situations, gradually reshapes both your circumstances and your identity. I've observed this reshaping process countless times during my research. Individuals who consistently apply the 5-minute principle don't just achieve more. They become more capable of achievement. their capacity for action expands. Their resistance to beginning diminishes. Their results compound. This compounding effect explains why achievement often appears to accelerate over time. The first steps are the hardest and yield the smallest visible results. But as the application of the principle becomes habitual, both the frequency of action and the magnitude of results increase exponentially. Consider how Amazon's Jeff Bezos built his company. From an online bookstore in a garage to one of the world's most valuable enterprises. The transformation wasn't sudden, but cumulative, the result of thousands of 5-minute decisions. To act immediately rather than eventually, each immediate action built on previous actions, creating compound growth in both capacity and results. The same mathematical reality applies to your life and aspiration. When you consistently collapse the gap between decision and action, when you apply the 5-minute principle across days, weeks, and months, you create compound growth in your achievements that eventually appears miraculous to those who don't understand the principle at work. This is the hidden advantage of immediate action. It doesn't just produce linear progress, but exponential transformation. The difference between those who achieve greatly and those who achieve modestly isn't just in the quality of their actions, but in the immediacy and consistency of those actions over time. I challenge you to apply this understanding to your definite purpose starting today, not tomorrow, not when circumstances improve, but within the next 5 minutes. Identify one action, however small, that will move you toward your goal. Then commit to taking that action immediately, before the resistance that prevents achievement has time to mobilize its forces against you. This commitment, this application of the 5-minute principle to your specific situation, can alter the trajectory of your life more profoundly than any external circumstance. It can convert your potential into reality, your aspiration into achievements, your vision into legacy. Remember, the world doesn't reward those who have the greatest potential or the grandest plans. It rewards those who take immediate action to convert potential into performance, plans into results. The 5-minute principle ensures that you stand among those who act rather than those who merely intend. The decision is yours. The next 5 minutes can be like the countless 5-minute intervals that have passed before, filled with contemplation rather than action, with intention rather than implementation. Or they can be the pivotal moment when everything changes, when you apply the principle that has built fortunes, created innovations, and transformed lives throughout history. The power to choose is yours alone. No one can make this decision for you. No one can take the first step on your behalf. The responsibility and the opportunity belong exclusively to you. As you consider this choice, remember that every achievement you admire began with a similar decision. Every fortune was built, every innovation created, every transformation accomplished through the consistent application of principles. Like the 5-minute rule, these individuals weren't granted special dispensation from the laws that govern achievement. They simply aligned themselves with these laws through immediate action. You can do the same. Right now, within the next 5 minutes, imagine yourself 5 years from now. Looking back on this moment, will you see it as the turning point when everything changed? Or will it blend into the background of countless postponed opportunities and delayed beginnings? The difference between these two futures isn't determined by external circumstances or innate capabilities. It's determined by your willingness to apply the 5-minute principle, to collapse the gap between decision and action until it virtually disappears. This willingness, this commitment to immediate implementation is the foundation of all significant achievement. It distinguished Thomas Edison from countless other inventors with similar knowledge. It separated Henry Ford from numerous other automotive pioneers with comparable vision. It differentiates those who merely dream from those who actually accomplish. The principle itself is simple. When faced with an important decision or action that moves you toward your definite purpose, give yourself exactly 5 minutes to begin. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, not when you feel completely ready. 5 minutes from now. This simplicity is precisely what makes the principle so powerful. It doesn't require elaborate systems or extraordinary capabilities. It requires only the courage to begin. Before you feel entirely prepared to act in the face of uncertainty, rather than waiting for its resolution. This courage, this willingness to act despite imperfect conditions is the common denominator of achievement across history. It's available to you at this moment, waiting to be claimed through immediate action toward your definite purpose. The question isn't whether the 5-minute principle works. Thousands of success stories across centuries and cultures have demonstrated its effectiveness beyond any reasonable doubt. The only question is whether you will apply it, whether you will be among those who convert potential into achievement through immediate action, or among those who postpone opportunity until it passes. The decision is yours, and it must be made within the next 5 minutes, not tomorrow, not when circumstances improve, not when you feel more confident or better prepared, but now, in this moment of possibility that will never come again in exactly the same form. The next 5 minutes can change everything. They can be the pivot point between mediocrity and mastery, between aspiration and achievement, between intention and implementation. They can be the moment when potential becomes performance, when vision becomes victory, when purpose becomes power. All it takes is one decision to begin. Now, within the next 5 minutes, this decision, this commitment to immediate action can alter the trajectory of your life more profoundly than any external circumstance or opportunity. The power is yours. The principle is clear. The moment is now. What will you do with your next 5 minutes?